was all I had to tell you. Obviously, we've got a lot we can tell you about our commitment to the countries of the Balkans and the broader neighbourhood. It's very important that these countries maintain a prospect of participating in our European project, because this can lead them to introduce reforms which would be enormously beneficial for their populations. Thank you.
Now we're going to start taking questions. We have a large number of people signalling, so I'm going to limit contributions to 90 seconds, 1.5 minutes for each person. That way we should get everybody in before we move on. So the first person is Mr. Petras Astrovicius from Lithuania.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, indeed, I think this is a strategic importance to keep the EU as open and involving project. As long as it goes as it is, we can thank the destiny we are in this environment. Indeed, I look at the European enlargement and even the European neighborhood policy as a kind of the Europeization concept. And as long as we are able to extend our best practices and even the style of living, our standards, around, it shows that our neighbors are eager to follow some patterns established. So that's why Europeization in a broader sense, it's more important than some partnership agreements or association agreements reached. Indeed, I would call on the quality of enlargement as an important aspect of this process. We can't diminish the quality of new member states once they become full member states in future as well. It means that negotiations as well as the implementation of the EU laws have to be at most important aspect to be followed by all of us. Again, just recently, today, there was an announcement about failed states index for 2013. And among those states, in the first part of most risky ones, there are many countries in neighborhood. My question to panelists,
thank you.
Do you see enough instruments, political and financial, for further integration and partnerships with our neighbors? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Joseph Horvat from Slovenia.
Hvala lepa, spoštovani predsedujoči, spoštovana visoka gosta.
Thank you, distinguished guests, dear colleagues. I'm glad that the rich diplomatic careers of both guests was connected to Slovenia as well. I know you're both friends of Slovenia. I defend the enlargement, especially to the Western Balkans. Hopefully today the GAC and then in a few days the European Council will make sure that Serbia gets a date for the beginning of accession negotiations, and then we can perhaps have a SAA with Kosovo. I would also like that when it comes to Macedonia, the Commission's recommendations on the beginning of negotiations could be confirmed. And I would also like to point out a gap on the political map, namely Bosnia and Herzegovina. I would like to know what the guests think about the real chances of Bosnia and Herzegovina to deepen its relations with the EU, especially in the light of the implementation of the demands from the European Court of Human Rights case, Sejic-Finci, and the general elections to be held there next year. I have to admit that the status quo in this country, which has been going on too long, worries me. Thank you.
Speaker is Anna Fatiga from Poland.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It is true that the process initiated with the Thessaloniki conference has been a success story. The European Union showed a good political vision and determination. I personally regret that we haven't shown a similar determination and vision for Eastern Partnership countries, because processes we witnessed at the beginning of their transition, their long march towards sovereignty, have been no lesser than in Western Balkan countries. I very much hope that in Vilnius we will be able to give a positive message to our Eastern Partnership countries. And one more thing on Turkey. We're very much concerned, all of us, witnessing the problems in that country. But this is a crucial country, crucial for security in the region. This is a state that has already shown great determination in its transition, and a country that is of great support, resolving a number of humanitarian problems in the region. So it is of crucial importance that any signals we send to Turkey are clear and positive and according to the competences of the EU institutions. Thank you.
It's Neusbauer from Austria.
Herr Vorsitzender, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Chairman, colleagues, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Mr. Inchko, and say that he has been tireless in his efforts to have peaceful cooperation and peaceful existence in Bosnia-Herzegovina. He's been working on pushing back corruption, having peaceful coexistence, and I'm extremely pleased that not just for historic reasons, but there are a lot of private family business relations with Croatia. So I'm looking forward to their accession. And that's a very important signal for the other countries. Croatia's path has reached its end. They have achieved their aim. And as regards Serbia and Kosovo, again, a lot has been achieved. We're bringing a lot of people with us. Obviously, there are still some concerns, Mitrovic, etc., but I think we'll be successful there as well. So I'd like to ask the chair, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I think the path to the state of law has been, there has been some critical comments. Is the situation hopeless, or is it more hopeful than one would imagine? Thank you.
Jan from Croatia.
Dear colleagues, thank you. Croatia is the first country in 31 years that is joining the European Union on its own. But be sure that Croatia has no ambition of being the last country to join. Croatia's first priority as a European Union member state is the joining the Schengen area. Our second priority is regional policy, notably enlargement of the European Union of the region of the Southeast Europe. Croatia has been persistent in its support to all countries of the region on their path to the European Union. We find this to be of highest importance, not only because of the ongoing economic crisis, but also to overall stability of the region. When looking to the region of Southeast Europe has to bear in mind that this region consists of post-conflict states and post-conflict societies. While the rest of the Europe has not been involved in war for 68 years, Southeast Europe, Croatia included, has been at war not 20 years ago. But Croatia's success story shows how legacy of war can be successfully overcome. Stability of the region is so important to Croatia because we don't want to pretend not to be part of it. Provided that countries of region fulfill all the criteria, it's our firm belief that will positively contribute to the European Union, at least as much the European Union will contribute to their benefit. And when I say Southeast European countries...
Thank you.
I think...
Okay. The next speaker is Mr. Richard Horzik from Hungary.
Thank you, the floor, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me congratulate the Croatian colleagues for going through the challenging road of European integration. Probably, as you know, Hungary has contributed highly to success of this process. The Croatian accession negotiations have shown many new challenges persist on both sides of the negotiation process. They took important decisions to become capable of addressing the crisis, but as an unfortunate side effect, the crisis management diverted the attention from the enlargement. That is why, Mr. Chairman, their assistance is crucial for the countries heading the European Union. Let me stress that the Hungarian National Assembly is actively involved in the European Union assistance program, provide for the support of national parliaments in the Balkans. Our parliament have implemented the most parliamentary twinning programs in the European Union, and we are ready to continue our mission. Hungary fully supports the expected outcome of the forthcoming European Council. Decisions should be made on Serbia, Albania and Macedonia. Other countries should be encouraged to take further efforts. In this respect, Mr. Chairman, Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think, requires special attention. Our duty is to encourage politicians in the country to stay on the European path and implement the necessary changes. Mr. Chairman, our Parliament is ready to support this process in this future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll come back to the panel. Firstly, maybe Ambassador, would you like to respond to some of those questions?
Yes, maybe I would start with a general comment about Balkan being a black hole, or in German, weißer Fleck on the map, you know. Nobody wants to have this black hole, the Balkan being a black hole, or inside the Balkans that Bosnia-Herzegovina would be such a black hole. And I like this, in the Greek language we have two expressions for enlargement. One is enlargement, and the second one is oloklirosi, which means completion or integration. We should complete Europe, because the Balkan is already encircled by European Union member states. Yeah? So this will be a completion, not a real enlargement in the classical sense. Yeah, so this completion is very important, and this integration is very important. Otherwise, the EU project will not be finished. So I am personally in favor of these EU instruments which we have on hand, and I'm in favor of early candidate status for all countries, including Bosnia-Herzegovina, but maybe for a late membership. In the meantime, the transition will take place, and this is most important, transition. Or Peter Sørensen, my friend from the EUSR, would say, the sausage machine. Once you're in this transition period, yeah, you just cannot get out, yeah, and you go forward. But of course, what is missing in Bosnia-Herzegovina is what you said earlier, leadership and also courage. We have seen in the Baltics, between Slovakia and Czech Republic and Slovenia, a fierce competition, who is better, who is faster, friendly competition, of course, yeah. You have seen a fierce rush, you know, towards Brussels, and this is all missing in Bosnia-Herzegovina. There is no competition, there is no sense of urgency, and there is no sense of purpose. So this is why Bosnia is lagging behind. And the instrument should be applied, EU instruments, but maybe also some more conditionality in future. And this conditionality worked in the past. For the visa liberalization, 174 conditions were given to Bosnia, and they fulfilled all of them, including biometric passport. Yeah? For the IMF, they always implement, of course, all the conditions, because it's about money. And we should, I think, in the words of Stefan Füle, recalibrate our approach, have a fresh look, because the last 7 years, unfortunately, Bosnia was stagnating, and the international community must now have a new philosophy. The present one, which is correct, was ownership. Local responsibility is a good one, but it didn't function, yeah? Because we don't have this responsibility by the politicians. No accountability and no responsibility. Well, you are concerned about, Petra said he's failed about, concerned about the failed state index. We have these instruments, EU instruments. We have also my instruments, the so-called bomb powers, executive powers. I think we should reconsider using them also in future. Jože Horvat said its Finci should be solved, but again, there must be a local effort to implement the decision of the Human Rights Court, you know. For 4 years, it's not being implemented, and about 500,000 citizens are being discriminated in Bosnia-Herzegovina because they cannot be elected. They can go to elections and vote, but they cannot be elected. All the 16 minorities and also people from so-called mixed marriages, you know. Rule of law, good governance is very important, and maybe Hungary can invent some new Szeged process again, because we have to support successful municipalities, democratic movements in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and maybe this will be then a new situation once we have also a recalibrated approach, new people, and more civil society.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Erwin, do you want to take over from there?
Just briefly, thank you. The question from the honourable member from Lithuania, I don't think it's a question of trying to create new instruments. I think what we need to do is make sure that the instruments that the EU has at its disposal should be used better, and there should be much more consistency in the EU approach with regard to the progress reports, and with regard to the whole element of conditionality. It is true that accession has become very, very complicated. If you compare the number of pages of acquis communautaire and the number of ministerial meetings that Ireland had in its accession with now, there's a world of difference. In Ireland we had 10 ministerial meetings for the whole accession process. Croatia, I don't know how many ministerial meetings they had. But at the same time, I think the European Union needs to focus and to adapt its strategy. And its decision last year to put the rule of law at the heart of the accession process was a very good move, because it puts more focus on the political aspects which sometimes are left aside. I mentioned the issue of political dialogue as being a particular problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, where a lot of my time was spent trying to convince the political leaders to pick up the phone and talk to each other, to try to create a climate of consensus, because they just didn't want to. If they were in government, they considered that they didn't have to engage with the opposition. These issues are real ones where I think the EU needs to be much more forceful in its message. And finally, obviously, the very positive experience of Slovenia in terms of consensus building for the accession is one, I think, which should be replicated in other countries. And Slovenia, and I'm sure Croatia, will be able to help with their expertise the other countries in the Western Balkans to reach their objective of integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. The next speaker is Gordana Komic from Serbia.
Thank you. Enlargement and European idea from our assessment, people of Serbia, in which behalf we are trying to address you, is that it is very powerful and vivid and vibrant idea, because of the fact that in the core of the idea of enlargement is a dialogue, is a free access and shared access of knowledge and skills, and that's what we are in lack of. And the strength of the idea we would like you to emphasize should be, even when criticized, seen as not being weak, but compared to the strength of the old truth that old habits die hard. Without the dialogue, without enlargement, there would be no improvement. There would be no normalization of the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo. There would be no improvement in the region, no all the things that we can work on in the future. And the process that we managed to achieve so far, together with the European Union, is so important, because it is a dialogue that is core of enlargement. And what we would like you all to send as a message, that success story of European Union supporting dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina is truly success story of the foreign policy of European Union, but also for Serbia. And we would like to have a clear message about the word impossible for date for Serbia to be read as I am possible, because we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bill Cash from the UK House of Commons.
A brief word of caution, perhaps, in the light of history and human nature. Reconciliation, obviously, is a marvellous thing, and it's very good to see progress when it's made. But on Bosnia-Herzegovina, could I just simply say, beware creating a compression chamber by overdoing the enforced harmonization. That can create a backlash, and be careful of that, I would suggest. On the Eastern Neighbourhood Partnership, which we haven't really discussed, again, the idea for the purposes of the countries concerned in security in the light of the surrounding countries, excellent, but providing for 80% of the European acquis it could turn into an over-ambitious and overextended European Union.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Simon Souter from France.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, for some time now we've been talking about enlargement and neighbourhood policy. It's unfortunately here that we're not talking about the countries of the south of the Mediterranean. And unfortunately, we're not discussing what's happening within the Union for the Mediterranean. Over the last few years, Martin Schulz has worked enormously on this. There was a meeting in Marseille with the 27 presidents of the Parliament, of the European Parliament, the presidents of the Parliament of the Southern Mediterranean. And seen from Dublin, perhaps it's difficult to see this, but the Mediterranean is a European sea. On the other hand, I will welcome the fact that in our draft contributions, we are quite clear on the fact that we want the European Summit this week to start negotiations with Serbia. But yesterday, the President's meeting, we saw objections being pushed back. And also, I think we're quite clear on what's happening in Turkey. Turkey is a candidate member of the European Union. Turkey is occupying the territory of a member state, occupying part of the territory of the Republic of Cyprus, and Turkey must respect a certain number of standards if they want to join the European Union, particularly respect for democracy, the right for protest, and state of law.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Epanimondas Marias from Greece.
Chairman, the question of enlargement is extremely important because it helps peaceful coexistence among peoples. Of course, there are certain conditions, and I have a question for the panel. Do you know that in December 2012, in Fyrom, police forces, according to information, entered the national parliament? They removed opposition MPs, and this is how they managed to vote for the budget of the country in question. Do you believe this goes along with enlargement criteria, or are we applying a double standard, different criteria in the case of Turkey? Because, of course, we too have pointed out that we need democracy in Turkey, but in the case of Fyrom, it seems that you do not set such conditions. If I'm referring to well-known events of 2012, we raised certain issues yesterday in connection with the text to be voted by us, the COSAC contribution in particular, and we wanted an amendment that read out in English on Fyrom.
Sufficiently fulfills the Copenhagen political criteria and maintaining good neighborly relations, including a negotiated, mutually agreed solution to the name issue.
In our view, this is a decisive element, and you rejected this. Let me say that my question confirms the fact that we apply double standards in the case of enlargement, and I would like to inform you of the fact that the COSAC contribution, if it remains as it is, we intend to vote against it.
It's Rosalind Scott from the UK House of Lords.
Do the speakers believe that the enlargement fatigue that we saw a few years ago is in danger of being replaced by accession fatigue in the countries who seek to join us, with processes taking many years to complete? There's some evidence that the enthusiasm of citizens in some countries is being sorely tested the longer these things take. How can we demonstrate that transition is in itself a positive thing and that the journey has benefits as well as the final destination? Does the panel believe that we should be focusing more on ensuring common values and approaches rather than a very legalistic approach of compliance with the acquis? It's vitally important that the EU meets its obligations to these countries and carries out the enlargement process fairly and objectively and free from short-term domestic considerations. We must take greater care to maintain the integrity of the enlargement process and to be seen to act in good faith. Both EU and national governments have a responsibility to communicate more clearly and decisively the very real benefits of enlargement, both for the countries coming in and for existing states. And finally, the House of Lords EU Select Committee has recently published its report into the enlargement process. It's very strong in its support for enlargement, and it's available online if any colleagues would like to see it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christos Messis from Cyprus.
Thank you, Chairman. It is a fact that the Lisbon Treaty is the foundation for a change to the way the EU operates, both internally and externally, with reference to relations with neighbors. And this became clear last year. It was a year that was full of incidents. We had financial crisis, we had conflicts, political instability in countries in the region of the EU. All this made it even harder to implement the neighbourhood policy. However, we cannot overlook the considerable improvements in democratic transition procedures in certain cases. As regards enlargement, a very important chapter, we need to emphasize the importance of the contribution of enlargement to peacekeeping and security, and this could further promote the EU's position internationally. As Mr. Ferrer said, strengthening rule of law and democratic governance for candidate countries is an important element of the enlargement procedure. Unfortunately, during the last few days, we are witnessing unfortunate incidents in Turkey. Every member state that wishes to accede to the EU should, first of all, respect citizens' human rights, as well as the human rights of citizens of neighboring countries. Using excessive force against demonstrators is to be condemned, so we really hope that Turkey will achieve further progress in freedom of expression. We hope that they will resolve the community issues and bring back smooth relations with Cyprus by ending their occupation of a part of Cyprus.
Would you like to answer first?
Thank you. Well, to respond to the honourable member from Greece, of course, the events of the 24th of December were dramatic and totally unacceptable in a candidate country, and it is regrettable that the reaction from the EU was not as strong as it should have been. At the same time, it is important that we don't distance ourselves from the situation. I think the best way, my personal feeling, to control the unfortunate behavior of the current government is to lock the country into the negotiating process. Because once you lock a country into a negotiating process, there's a whole dynamic that continues and that controls the developments in a given country. So the internal situation in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia is of great concern. Only last weekend there were more demonstrations against the gay and lesbian community on Friday, I understand. So these are very serious problems, but at the same time we do have the continuing dispute with Greece. The only way that that can be resolved is by a dialogue between both countries. Ireland was able to reach an agreement with our former enemies. We sat down. Nelson Mandela will constantly be reminded of what he said. If you want to make peace, you have to learn to sit down with your former enemies, the ones you regard as your enemies, and then they will become your partners. Dialogue is the only way, and I really would plead that Greece and the former Yugoslav Republic should sit down and solve this problem once and for all. If you don't sit down and talk, it won't be solved, and so long as it's not solved, the current Prime Minister in the country, in the former Yugoslav Republic, will abuse of this to hide the deficiencies that are existing, the weaknesses, the political dialogue and so on. So that is, I think, what is really necessary. I do indeed feel that Southern Mediterranean requires more attention, but you would need a separate session for that. There's so much that has been going on there, but at the same time, as I said very briefly, the EU needs to develop much more its capacity of strategic policy development because it was often overtook by events during the Arab Spring, etc. So it needs to develop much more and be more proactive. Finally, I have to again reiterate that what was achieved between Pristina and Belgrade was remarkable. And again, it demonstrates that through dialogue, you can make the impossible become possible. And surely it should be not difficult for other countries in the region to emulate the example of Serbia and Kosovo, who managed to achieve so much in a short space of time and demonstrated the value of finding common ground. And I would like also to pay tribute to the UK House of Lords. I had the privilege of testifying at one of the reports there on EU enlargement, and the House of Lords has always been extremely positive. And I do agree that the EU needs to do much more to communicate the benefits of enlargement to its own citizens in the EU member countries. Much more should be done, because you see now there's increasing reaction against enlargement, but also in the accession countries themselves, engaging much more with civil society and with the youth, so that they can be the leaders and ensure effective implementation, like in Croatia now and others, of the benefits of accession. So I fully agree with that assessment.
Thank you, Erwin. Ambassador?
Yeah, about this British comment on history and human nature. This works, of course, in both directions. You can use history and human nature in a negative sense, but you can also use it in a constructive sense. And we hope that these constructive forces in the Balkans will be stronger. On the Mediterranean, with the accession of Croatia, you will gain 6,000 kilometers of additional shores, Mediterranean shores. 1,185 islands will be now yours in the European Union, but I think the process should be continued. And also, not least because we heard yesterday, in 2000, at the end of this century, we will be only 4% of global population, 4%. So we have to look where we can have an eastern enlargement or southern enlargement, Mediterranean. And even Bosnia-Herzegovina has about 30 kilometers of Adriatic shore, so it's also looking forward. Yeah. About benefits and about enlargement fatigue, I think there are also benefits for European Union members if the Balkan countries will be accepted to European Union. Just 50 minutes by plane from Vienna, there's a Balkan region, and we can experience even today or in future, if this region is not integrated, drug smuggling, organized crime, human trafficking, and if there would be another conflict, again, refugee streams. Yeah, we in Austria have accepted over 300,000 citizens from former Yugoslavia, Germany even more. And I think our security, this is a statement of a Swiss intelligence officer, our security in Central Europe starts at the Balkans. So it's also in our interest, and I hope that this enlargement fatigue will be overcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now, we have 15 people remaining, so I'm going to have to limit the contributions to a minute, and I'd be grateful if you'd do that, please, and that way we can get through everybody. The first of those is Christiana Vienne from Belgium.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I recall that the European Union isn't just a single market, it's above all a political project? The speakers were talking about their concerns, and those are reinforced by certain developments in countries that are already members of the European Union. You can't have an a la carte approach to the European Union with concessions on democracy, human rights, women's rights, respect of parliamentary democracy, respect of the separation of powers, and a free press. I am convinced that you cannot and must not erect obstacles to enlargement for the reasons already discussed by Mr. Faure, amongst others. But new member states have to take on board the democratic demands. So it's not a sort of supermarket where you can choose what you want. You have to accept the lot, like in a marriage.
Juan Mirso Pascu from the European Parliament.
Well, thank you very much. I would say that neighborhood policy and enlargement are practically sequential. And if we look at the regions which we are discussing now, Northern Africa, the Balkans, Western Balkans, and the East, which is comprised under the partnership, Eastern Partnership, I would say, that in the case of North Africa, neighborhood policy is dominant, and enlargement is, shall we say, in a smaller proportion. When you move to the Balkans, it's exactly the reverse. You have the enlargement, which is dominant compared to neighborhood policy which does not apply to candidate countries. But when you go to the Eastern Partnership, you will have I would say, neighborhood policy which is really translating into enlargement. And I think you know that from this point of view, Vilnius summit is fundamental, because if we have tangible results there, we would be able to say to the opponents of it, that practically, you know, they are not dissatisfied. They are not dissatisfied.
Thank you very much.
One more thing.
You're out of time, sorry. Mr. Paolo Tancredi from Italy.
Grazie Presidente, permettetemi di dare
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of the entire delegation, I'd like to welcome our Croatian friends. The strategy of the progressive membership of the Balkan countries to the European Union fixes errors made in previous rounds of accession. This is now, of course, is after economic improvements. Now, in 2014, we have a strategy for the Ionic macro area with a whole range of regional countries involved. This is a method which has always been looked at and done in the past in the Baltic. I'm afraid the interpreter is having great trouble keeping up with this. The speed is simply impossible.
Utilizzo dei fondi comunitari e nazionali in quei settori. Per altro verso, la strategia contribuirà a rafforzare la coesione europea in un'area ufficiale.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mi piacerebbe opinione dei relatori.
Sorry. We have a limited time, and I am trying to get everybody in, so I appreciate that it's difficult, but if you could be as brief as possible. The next speaker is Jovan Martinovic from Montenegro.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear colleagues, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the fact that Croatia is becoming the 28th member of the European Union. On the behalf of the Europe Integration Committee and my own name, I would like to congratulate for this great success state of Croatia, hoping that its accession would lead to deeper cooperation among all Western Balkan countries. Regarding the European integration of Montenegro, I would like to inform you about news over the issue since our last meeting. After we closed the Chapter 25 in last December, we closed another Chapter 26 in April this year. I would like to emphasize that closing of these chapters has been assessed as great state success, and it represents strong impulse for Montenegro, referring our further negotiation process in a sense of gaining new merits for opening new chapters. We also expect the opening of the two most challenging Chapter 23 and Chapter 24 as soon as possible. The action plans for these chapters have already done, and it was said that Montenegro has respected all deadlines, which has crucial importance for this phase of Montenegro accession.
Thank you very much. Mr. Peter Lukic from Belgium.
Dank u, voorzitter.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear colleagues, I'd like to start by thanking the Irish presidency for the perfect organisation of this COSAC. And to say in Irish, Gaurav Mahagut, thank you very much. Colleagues, Europe is not a monopolistic bloc, but rather is permanently in movement. Over the last few years, we've looked at external working of the European Union. But should we not also look at the internal enlargement of the European Union? But not just in Europe, but in the member states itself, there is movement. Recent democratic developments in Scotland and Catalonia could lead to the arrival of new member states in the European Union. Even in Belgium, the current state system is under pressure. How will the European Union deal with this? As a Flemish nationalist, I feel that Europe should be proactive in its thinking about regions that choose for independence within a European context. Europe and nationalism are not opposed. In fact, the opposite is the case. Europe it can benefit from this.
Galazuski from Poland.
Thank you very much. I'd like to come back to Ukraine. The association agreement with Ukraine is not only an economic project, but a political one too. Signing this agreement can in fact define our relations between the EU and Eastern Europe and Russia for many years to come. Unlike what the present authorities of Russia believe, the association of Ukraine with the European Union will in fact be attractive for Russia and the Russian economy. and can in fact bring benefits for the Russian society. We should do our best to sign this agreement. One more thing on Moldova. The region on the Dniester River, or Transylvania, this is the crucial region.
Next speaker is Mr. Johannes Huebner from Austria.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is to Mr. Valentinisco on Bosnia-Herzegovina. Is the European Union and the administration refusing to deal with reality? 19 years after Dayton, almost 20 years, we have at least 2 of 3 communities that are rejecting acceptance of this state. To some extent, Croats, some Bosnians are in favor, but we are insisting on a unitary state. And we talk a lot about European values, democracy, self-determination of peoples, etc. But the decisive point, self-determination of the people in this area, what state do they want to live in? Do you not think that there's a certain contradiction there to our own values? Do we not need to completely re-steer our policy, possibly with dissolution of a state, if things don't work?
I will just address 1 or 2 questions because my colleague will address others. Yeah. Well, as far as self-determination is concerned in Bosnia-Herzegovina, there were 2 possibilities already. One was the plebiscite, how you call it, in '92, when people decided to have an independent state, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and later the war broke out. Then another possibility was the Washington Agreement, when federation was created inside Bosnia-Herzegovina. And the last possibility to make a change was the Dayton Agreement, when everybody was sitting there, including the Serbs from Serbia and Croats from Zagreb, and everybody gave his signature to this state. After 100,000 people killed, international community wanted that this state stays together, of course with a particular configuration. Inside 2 entities, inside 1 entity, 10 cantons, but everything is inside Bosnia-Herzegovina. So we have to work on this, and we have to give Bosnia a long-term perspective and a long-term chance. It is not a perfect state today. I agree with it, but I think partition should be over in former Yugoslavia. Otherwise, we could also put into question, say, other regions where people live. For example, in Republika Srpska, you have many municipalities where 16 minorities live, or Vojvodina, where also 16 nations live and minorities. But I think this is over, and especially I have no mandate. I have just a mandate of the Dayton Peace Agreement, and I must keep the country together, and this is my task. And believe me, if you ask ordinary people on the street, everybody will say, let's have this 1 state, but of course with all this autonomy inside the state, and this country can move forward in such a way. There is no other mandate. At the same time, I know there are many open wounds because Karadzic and Mladic, this in Den Haag, the process is still going on about war criminals. Then we have every year funerals, you know. Last year we have buried 700 people in Srebrenica. This year we will bury about 500, you know. These wounds are still open, so we must give Bosnia-Herzegovina a long-term approach. Erwan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I fully agree with the honourable member from Belgium about the importance of conditionality for the accession process. At the same time, it's important that there be consistency within the European Union, making sure that the European Union member countries themselves fully respect what we are asking the candidate countries to respect in terms of media freedom, rule of law, and all the values on which the European Union is based. Secondly, with regard to the Vilnius summit, Ukraine, of course, it is important that Vilnius demonstrate a clear signal in terms of the benefits that can come from the neighbourhood policy, and signing an association agreement with Ukraine, together with the deep and comprehensive free trade arrangement, which will be part of it, also with Moldova, would give that signal. But we mustn't forget that there is the issue of Russia. And I think we need to devote more and more efforts within the European Union on engaging with Russia, because there are conflicting interests. Russia is trying to influence decision-making in Ukraine with its offer of a customs union. Similarly, it is doing the same thing in Moldova, and this is where, of course, the Transnistrian settlement process becomes so complicated, because they are trying to maintain Transnistria in their own sphere of influence. So this is something which really will be a challenge, and I think there the European Union needs to find a way of engaging more with Russia in order to resolve these particular challenges.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Mr. Birger Armansson of Iceland.
Chairman, let me make a brief statement on the status of Iceland's accession process after a new government was brought to power following our parliamentary elections a few weeks ago. First of all, the new government has a positive agenda on Europe. We look at EU as a friendly partner, which includes many of our closest and oldest friends and allies. We are members of the European Economic Area and Schengen, and we also have a cooperation with many European nations in NATO. However, the new government of Iceland does not believe that accession to the EU, as sought for the last 4 years under the previous government, is in Iceland's best interest. From the beginning, the EU membership application was a controversial project in Iceland, and there has never been a consensus on this objective. The new government has therefore informed the Commission that it has put Iceland's EU accession negotiations on hold for the moment.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Mr. Atis Ležins from Latvia.
Thank you. Enlargement is taking place in a dramatically changing world where we are reminded every day of the emerging new global geopolitics. One, this means that even big states in the European Union are small compared with China, India, and perhaps down the line Brazil. We need to hang together, or we will each hang separately. It would be a great mistake for Great Britain to leave the European Union, that is, to de-enlarge the European Union and diminish herself. Two, we continue to struggle with the concept of empire overstretch. Though the European Union is not an empire, we have to be honest and work with this concept. We cannot ignore it. At the same time, keeping in mind the eventual inclusion of the remaining Balkans in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Herman de Croo of Belgium.
Voorzitter, wel bedankt.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that today's debate is an indication of issues that could be raised in a future COSAC with more time for a debate. Firstly, we have a veto right. Every national parliament has to say yes or no to any enlargement. Secondly, there are major problems, issues, Turkey, relations with Ukraine, Mediterranean, all of these issues. So I would ask you and our colleagues in Lithuania to give a lot more time to these issues. And I'd also like to wish you all the best in the way in which you deal with this. But I think we can see the large number of speakers on the list that this kind of issues need a lot more time next time. But also, this is a forum where veto rights can be expressed.
There's Johansson of Sweden.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm grateful for your excellent presidency. I think the starting point, and still is, that we are here to preserve peace and democracy, human rights and stability in other countries and the EU are objectives, and we continually develop the EU and our governing bodies. We're also affected by international affairs, and they affect us differently in different countries. Several people are saying we should slow down enlargement. People tend to be dazzled by particular things in the news, or and I welcome all the current applicant countries. According to the usual assessment procedure, they can become members, and any others who may follow them. And having said that, on behalf of the Swedish delegation, could I welcome Croatia in particular, who will be members in 6 days' time. Peace is always larger than an individual country's interest.
Asir Canisoglu from Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all know that as a candidate country, Turkey has to comply with the democratic standards of EU. The recent protests, which started in Istanbul and spread to 76 cities, reminded the people of Turkey that in order to breathe in a society, you need democracy. And the reaction to the protesters displayed the autocratic face of the state. Now, I know that some people may say that this shows Turkey is far away from European values, but I say that hundreds of thousands of people all over Turkey have actually proven to have these values. Therefore, it would be unjust if the criticisms should lead to loosening the ties between Turkey and EU. I hope this ongoing struggle for better democracy will underline the urgency of reviving the negotiations and opening chapters 23-24 so that issues related to violations of human rights, fundamental freedoms, problems on justice and judiciary can be openly discussed and improved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Johannes Koskinen from Finland.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja ja kiitos myös COSACin sihteeristölle kompaktista raportista, jossa on laajentumis- ja lähentymisneuvottelujen tila.
Thank you very much. It's been extremely.
Alustajien näkemykset
Thank you very much.
Balkanin alueella
Thank you for reflecting the situation vis-à-vis enlargement negotiations. And I think that the situation in the Balkans has been very well analyzed. Now, I'd like to talk about the situation going forward, and particularly in terms of EU enlargement and Turkey and the Ukraine. Clearly, there will be a long transition period.
Jossa valtioita pystytään kansakuntia kehittämään siten, että ne tulevat jäsenkelpoisiksi.
Could there be possibilities in the EEA, the European Economic Area, to provide help so that these countries can finally accede? Perhaps we could make better use of the EEA.
Yes. Can I ask two questions? The first one is, why now in Bosnia and Herzegovina that it's been decided that we need to recalibrate our approach, that we need to be now much more forceful, and that we must wait for demonstrations on the streets of Sarajevo, when in fact we have been forewarned for quite a while. I quote a gentleman called Paddy Ashton, who spoke about the inability of the political leadership in Bosnia to come to terms with the reality of the situation there. Why is it we've ignored the wonderful diaspora of Bosnia and Herzegovina who've been pleading with us as politicians to please recognize that while we applaud the Croatian progress and the Serbian and Macedonian progress, that poor old Bosnia and Herzegovina have been neglected by both the EU and the United Forces in Bosnia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Igors Pimenovs from Latvia.
So we're talking about political components of the enlargement. However, an economic component is even more important in my understanding. Maastricht criteria stipulate macroeconomic requirements regarding candidate member states. In the meantime, the economic history of the last 10 years of the EU brought one more obvious criterion that should be taken into account. And it is a competitiveness of a particular economy which can be proved by a balanced foreign trade. If it is neglected, a new member state is going to face either a credit bubble or a lasting stagnation within the EU. It will mean suffering for people, their disappointment, and even more serious problems for EU and itself. I argue that the EU need lift the level of enlargement requirements, and it is not in contradiction with the good neighbourhood policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers this morning for being so short. I do appreciate it. We'll go first to the Ambassador.
Okay, thank you very much. I think with Bosnia-Herzegovina, maybe one mistake happened. We just thought that considering the fierce competition, as I said, between friendly competition between Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Poland, and so on, who would be better, you know. We thought this will the same will happen in Bosnia-Herzegovina, that this pull factor, you know, this attractiveness of European Union will be so strong that local leaders will simply work like in the 10 enlargement countries. Unfortunately, this was not the case, and this is why I say, and this is also what Füle said, we must recalibrate our approach and to see what new policy we can have for Bosnia-Herzegovina, because obviously for the last 7 years we had quite some stagnation. Earlier we had 11 years of huge development in Bosnia-Herzegovina when the international community was a little bit more robust, I would say. So much about Bosnia-Herzegovina that we have to a new approach on this, to this country. Otherwise, I think there are not many questions left for me. I just want to stress that next year we have 100 years of the attentat of Sarajevo. You know that Franz Ferdinand was killed, and we are expecting not least under the French initiative also, huge celebrations or commemorations, commemorations in Sarajevo. And this will be a chance, you know, to send messages of peace to the world. And we from Austria are sending down the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. This will be also a peace concert. It will be in June. And I think this will be a unique chance to send this message. At the same time, this next year should be a breakthrough year for the Balkan countries as far as European Union is concerned. We should have a situation where every single country has a contractual relation with European Union, be it SAA, be it a candidate status, like Croatia now, a full membership, yeah? But next year there should be such a situation that everybody has a contractual relation with EU. I have still met the last attentat of Sarajevo. He died in 1990 because there were 5, as you know, and the first one killed Franz Ferdinand. But these times, I think, should be behind us. We should look into the future, and also the Balkan region should be a region of peace, stability, and prosperity. And I think only then we can speak about holoklerosi, the Greek word of completion and integration of all of Europe, and which will continue, of course, then also in the southern part and in the eastern part. And only then we will be a factor in world affairs between the United States and China.
Thank you very much. Erwin?
Well, I do agree with the honourable member from Belgium. These issues require much more time for debate, so I would recommend that. Just 2 final issues I'd like to emphasise. First of all, that I think a number underlined that we are dealing with a European Union based on values, a community of values, and we have to make sure that the enlargement process does mean to translate those values and into the candidate countries, that those candidate countries do accept the conditionality, the responsibilities, and also all the benefits that will come from accession. I think this is not emphasized enough, and I think it is important on the EU to ensure that engagement with civil society should be much more at the core of the EU enlargement policy. It is not systematic enough. And this will be a good investment for the future when those countries actually become members of the European Union. And secondly, I do feel that when we're dealing with post-conflict societies, We don't spend enough time to learn from past experiences. Every conflict, of course, is unique, and every conflict requires a unique solution. But there are some universal principles that can be applied, can be very useful. I mentioned Northern Ireland. I don't know if all of you know that before the Good Friday Agreement, all the Northern Ireland parties went down to South Africa in 1997 to see what lessons could be learned from the South African reconciliation process. They traveled in different planes to Johannesburg. They traveled in different buses, the Republican parties in one bus, the Unionist parties in another bus. But it is only when they met Nelson Mandela that they agreed to come together in the hotel. And he made so clear to them, he said that if you want to make peace and bring peace to the islands, you have to sit down with your enemy and talk to them. And then they will become your partners, as I mentioned. So a year later, we had the Good Friday Agreement. And I also mentioned what we did last year with the